Today on The Nation Speaks, swarms of hammer-wielding thieves looting California luxury stores in brazen acts of organized robbery. But why? What's behind it? We try to find out with author and professor Wilfred Riley. Then in this week's America Q&A, we ask, what differences do you think there should be between citizens and residents of the United States? Next, it's Thanksgiving travel time and millions of flyers will pass through TSA checkpoints, a ritual that didn't exist 2 decades ago. As the TSA turns 20, we ask top aviation security expert Jeff Price what's gone well and what needs to be done better. Finally, in our second America Q&A, what do you think of YouTube's decision to hide dislike counts on its videos? The holidays are here and people are on the move. Air travel is almost back to pre-pandemic levels. The TSA says it expects to screen about 20 million passengers during the 10 days of Thanksgiving travel. The TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, it's a household name now, but it hasn't been for that long. It was born 20 years ago this month in response to the 9/11 terror attacks. It's almost hard to imagine how different the airport experience was back before the TSA. Security used to be quick and easy. Just plop your carry-on the conveyor belt. It heads through the X-ray machine while we walk through a metal detector. Shoes, coats, and belts still on. Water bottles, Swiss Army knives, knitting needles, no problem. And loved ones could see us off right up until the departure gate. Lately, more people have had health concerns when flying, but as we become airborne again, it is worth asking, how secure are our airports? With us to answer is Jeff Price, a world expert on aviation security. He writes the textbooks on the topic. He's a professor and trains airport management and safety issues. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you very much, Cindy.
So you recently wrote that today's security measures are far better than pre-9/11, but there are new threats that we aren't necessarily prepared for, and I really want to get into that. But first, maybe you can give us a more detailed picture of what's changed since 9/11.
Sure thing. The simplest answer to that question is virtually everything changed since 9/11. Prior to 9/11, TSA was not an agency at all. It just did not exist. The airlines hired contractors to do the screening. As you mentioned, screening was very perfunctory at the time. In fact, the technology at the time really wasn't even designed to capture the threats that were out there, and neither were our policies either. You could take small knives on board, you could take pointed objects on board, box cutters and so forth. So our policies really weren't where they needed to be. Our procedures and our technology was not where it needed to be. When TSA was created, they took over regulating aviation security. They took over all the screening checkpoints. The technology has all been upgraded ever since. The kind of reinvigorating the air marshal program, establishing the checked baggage screening, which we never screened checked bag before. Well, I think a lot of people thought we did. Even establishing more thorough background checks for airport employees and security for private charter operations. So it virtually everything has changed.
Wow, and if I understand it right, those contracted, screeners before were just minimum wage workers, no background checks, nothing like that. Is that right?
It is. The background checks prior to 9/11 for any airport worker were very scarce. It was an essential employment history check. Today, it's a comprehensive criminal history record check. It's what's called a security threat assessment, which is a name check against the terrorist watch list and various other federal government databases. It's much more comprehensive than it used to be. And in fact, I was a screener back in the 1980s, and there was me and the other minimum wage employees there. Turnover was nearing 80, 90, and sometimes even 100% at some airports. It was just a low-paying job. It was an expense item for the airlines, so they only put as much money into it as they had to meet federal compliance.
So before we get into kind of what new threats might be on the horizon, how do you feel today about, the security profile of what the TSA and airports are doing?
I can sincerely say it's much better than it was prior to 9/11. That said, it will never be 100% simply because we have to continue to fly. And there's always going to be room for improvement. I always throw this question out in my classes. do you think we're safer now than we were before 9/11? And I always get a variety of answers: yes, no, maybe. The real answer to that question is not necessarily are we safer, are we not safer. It's, is security better? And it's much better than it used to be. Always has room for improvement.
What kind of threats do you think we should be paying attention to? Maybe, especially ones that we might not be.
I think that the three top threats we should be paying attention to are cyber, drones, and the insider threat. The insider threat has always been there. In fact, a lot of the aviation attacks in history, it's been an insider that either facilitated or carried out the attack, or in some way assisted the attack by smuggling guns and grenades on board an aircraft, or allowing access to the airport. So the insider threat remains. Even though we have much more comprehensive background checks than we do before, there's less available information on somebody who's been radicalized and has access to the airport. That's a very, very difficult gap to fill. And there's ways to do it: workplace violence training, being more aware of your surroundings, your fellow employees, and what's going on. So I think that's an area that's always going to be a threat that we always need to continue to address. We're starting to see drone attacks now overseas. Just recently, I believe it was the Iranian Prime Minister who was the potential victim. Fortunately, I was out of it okay, but of several drones with explosives that were flown with the intent to assassinate him. And there's been airports in the Middle East that have been attacked by drones with explosives. That is a completely plausible scenario that we could see here, either at airports or on a particular aircraft as it's flying in lower altitudes. The third one is cybersecurity. And just recently, TSA issued a non-classified, so I'm not getting anybody into trouble here, memorandum to airports to include a cyber incident coordinator as part of their airport security staffing.
Could you give an example or two of how a cybersecurity attack would work?
The most obvious scenarios that are out there that people can see just by looking at the system from the outside is messing around with airline reservation systems to steal tons of data, messing around with airline reservation and flight information display screens to give improper data, or just shut them down through denial of service attacks. This might seem relatively harmless because what's the big deal? I can't see where my flight's coming in. I got an app for that or something like that. The problem is it's going to jam up the aviation system. Millions and billions of dollars are going to start being lost by the hour that those systems are down. And a lot of people aren't going to get to where they need to go. I think that's something a lot of people forget. It's not just about the money. There's somebody sitting on a flight that's trying to go see a loved one that they might only see one more time in their life. There's somebody that's trying to make a wedding. There's somebody that is trying to go take care of some other business situation that their job relies on. The worst case scenarios in cyber is being able to hack into airport security systems, or even worse than that, the air traffic control system, with the theory being, and we've seen this in movies and TV shows, that somebody could feed false information to air traffic control centers or even to aircraft directly to provide bad information that could result in a major accident or incident.
Be sure to watch the entire episode, now available exclusively at epochtv.com, a new completely censorship-free premium subscription platform. Brought to you by the Epoch Times. See you there.